Faced with persistent drought and an early heat wave, Spain is suffering from a water scarcity. At a time when 80% of the available water is being used to supply this vegetable garden of Europe, many voices are being raised calling for a rethink of the management of the blue gold. If in France the popular expression is "in April, don't loosen your clothes," in Spain we say April, the barrels are full, that is, in April there is a lot of water in the sky. But this saying was not in time for the beginning of 2023, on the contrary, not only was this April the driest month ever in the country, but many cities also recorded record high temperatures for this period of the year. On Thursday, April 27th, at around 5 in the evening, the thermometer rose to 38.7 degrees in Córdoba and to 37.8 degrees in Seville, Andalusia, according to data from the National Meteorological Agency. After an abnormally hot and dry winter, residents, politicians, and scientists counted on the change in the weather this April to mitigate the country's drought. The situation is particularly worrisome in the regions of Catalonia and Andalusia, where water reservoirs are filled to less than 25% of capacity, commented lamenting Jorge Olcina, head of the Laboratory of Climatology at the University of Alicante. In these two provinces, local governments imposed restrictions at the end of February, banning garden irrigation, filling swimming pools, and reducing agricultural irrigation. In the village of Javern, in the heart of Andalusia, thousands of parishioners of different churches organized a procession on Monday, May 1st, to beg for rain, holding up the statue of Christ with the cross, abuelo in Spanish. Note that this statue has not been removed from the church vaults since 1949. The rest of Spain is not immune from this phenomenon. The level of water reserves is increasingly alarming in the regions of Valencia, Murcia, Castilla-La Mancha, and even in Extremadura. Available water reserves have fallen to less than 40% of the total capacity there, continues Jorge Olcina, lamenting. Spain is experiencing a severe drought, as it is still suffering from the catastrophic effects of the dry summer of 2022 and the dry winter that followed, explains Serge Zaka, lecturer in agroclimatology. The condition of the soil and water reserves in general is similar to what we usually see in August. It is absolutely unprecedented. Europe's vegetable garden is in danger. In this country, often called Europe's vegetable garden because it exports a large portion of its agricultural production, farmers are the first victims of this historic drought. According to the Agriculture Committee, one of the country's main agricultural unions, 60% of the grain crops, which are not irrigated, are currently suffocating, literally, because of the lack of rain. These grains are sown in the fall and harvested in the spring, like wheat and barley, says Serge Zaka. Because of the scarcity of water, it has stopped growing before it is ripe. So we will not be able to harvest it. Also, the cultivation of olive trees, pistachios, and almonds will certainly decrease. Because even if these plants are accustomed to a dry climate, they will undoubtedly suffer in very high temperatures like this. For fruits and vegetables on small farms that operate without irrigation, farmers try to delay sowing as much as possible in anticipation of more favorable conditions. But the more time passes, the more likely it is that the growing season will be missed. Large irrigated crops in southern Spain will have a slightly higher chance of survival, but in the face of water shortages and irrigation restrictions, farmers will certainly have to reduce yields, concludes Serge Zaka. In short, only crops near the coast, irrigated by desalination plants, can survive. The Spanish government, which has come to the aid of farmers, has already announced a series of tax boosts, including cutting the income tax imposed on 800,000 farmers and professionals by about 25%. Limitations of the model, based on water abundance. This drought shows us the limits of the Spanish agricultural model, which is based on a false impression of abundant water, says Julio Perea, head of water issues for Greenpeace Spain. Today, we find that this sector alone accounts for 80% of the country's fresh water consumption. Since 1950, In order to combat the recurring water shortages, successive governments have built hundreds of dams and infrastructure to divert water from rivers. In total, according to the Dams and Reservoirs Association, about 1,200 of them have been created, a record number in Europe, mainly in the southern half of the country. It is enough to irrigate the fields of small farmers with water-intensive crops and also for tourism activities. These infrastructures have encouraged us to draw again and again, without measure, from our reserves to support this irrigated agriculture. And when the title Europe's Vegetable Garden, the environmental activist continues. Then he adds, but at what cost? Our water tables have reached a state of water stress. Today, with the addition of the increasingly obvious consequences of global warming, this model is completely unsustainable. Desertification. Moreover, according to Patricio Garcia Feos, director of the Desertification Research Center in Valencia, this overexploitation of groundwater, combined with climate change, will accelerate the process of desertification in Spain. Because of climate change, drought has become more frequent and more intense, and temperatures are constantly rising. All of this contributes to the drying of vegetation and the loss of soil fertility and its ability to store water. This phenomenon is accelerating once we add to it the overexploitation of groundwater. So it is necessary to combat climate change while at the same time learning how to manage water better, otherwise it will become a big part